So I think we should start now. I'd like to welcome everybody here. I'm HELENA COBBAN. I'm the president of Just World Educational, which is co-hosting this webinar to celebrate Anne Joyce's amazing career of nearly 40 years as editor of the Middle East Policy Journal. So Just World Educational is a small but feisty nonprofit working for to educate the public here in the United States and elsewhere about the need for a more just world and how we might get there. We have a strong concern about the events in West Asia, the area also known as the Middle East, and also a strong concern to end wars and build a more peaceful world. So today we are celebrating Anne Joyce because she has been a board member of Just World Educational since the organization was founded some 6 or 7 years ago. And she has played the role of secretary of the board, and she has played a huge role in helping us to strategize and keep the board and the organization moving forward. So that's our interest in helping to celebrate her, what I think of as a day job that she had as the editor of Middle East Policy Journal. I'm happy also to note that we're going to have many good people taking part here, including Ambassador Chaz W. Freeman Jr., who helped the Middle East Policy Council to make a real impact during his presidency of it in the period 1997 to 2009. Ambassador Freeman, as I'm sure most of you know, is a very talented diplomat with a stunningly broad range of accomplishments in many parts of the world. He was ambassador to Saudi Arabia during Operation Desert Storm. He has negotiated in Spanish with Fidel Castro over the situation in Angola, and he was earlier President Nixon's interpreter during Nixon's breakthrough 1972 visit to Beijing. So first of all, let me just say, thank you, Chaz, for being with us, and thank you, Anne, for giving us the opportunity for this party.
Well, thank you for doing it. And yeah, let me add my thanks to Chaz Freeman for associating himself with our organization and staying such a long time. Thank you.
I couldn't escape.
We had our claws into you, yes. Well,
you were educating me daily.
So
nobody believes that. Everyone is chuckling along with you.
The bulk of today's program will consist of a conversation I'll conduct with Ambassador Freeman and Anne Joyce. And after that conversation, we'll hope to have time for a few contributions or questions from our VIP attendees. If you'd like to speak during that section of the program, please contact our colleague Amel Zaroug via chat. You will find her in the chat box and tell her if you'd like to speak on screen or not. I don't know how many of you might be attending in your pajamas or whatever, but if you'd like to speak on screen, that would be great. Then she can put you into the queue. So first, let me introduce our co-host, Basma El-Hussein. Is Basma here yet?
I think she is still not linked in.
Ah, okay. Well, I'll give the introduction of Basma, and then I'll move to the current editor of Middle East Policy, Mr. Adam Joyce. So Basma El-Hussein, who describes herself as a proud Palestinian American, is the current executive director of Middle East Policy Council. She has served in a number of policy-related posts in Congress and the White House, and she's led congressional affairs for the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Prior to joining MEPC last year, she founded Al-Hussein Global Strategies. Among other commitments, Ms. El-Hussein has also been a Truman National Security Project partner, a board member of Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security, and a term member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So since Basma is still coming here, I think I'll hand straight on over to Adam Joyce, who's the current editor of Middle East Policy, a journal with a very long and distinguished history, which we will go into at greater length during the main conversation with Anne and with Chaz Freeman. But Adam, if you could say a few things about what you're planning for the future of the journal, and then introduce us to Anne Joyce.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. And I think Basma, unfortunately, she's having some technical issues, so she's definitely trying to join us. But thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be editing the journal. We're striving to maintain Anne's level of excellence, and we're excited to have launched some new ventures as well. We're publishing many articles every week on our website, mepc.org, including analyses by and interviews with experts on the region. We're also preparing to produce smart content on regional affairs for platforms where we can reach a broader audience, including Substack, Instagram, and everyone's favorite villain, TikTok. But I hope that however you like to receive content, that you'll take advantage of the many different formats that we'll be offering later this summer and throughout the fall. But I just want to focus on why we're here, the extraordinary career of Anne Joyce. Anne was born as her father set off for the Pacific to fight in World War II and grew up mostly in the Northeast, but after her father's death at age 41, was forced to return to a small town in the Midwest to finish high school. She earned undergraduate and graduate degree in Iowa City, where she then earned another master's degree in linguistics and taught English as a second language at Coe College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Anne moved to Virginia in 1979 and soon began to teach the English language to students at Georgetown. And this was a fateful experience, as the husband of one of her coworkers soon told her of a job opening at a new venture she was starting called the American Arab Affairs Council. In 1983, this retired Foreign Service officer, George Nafee, offered Anne a job as assistant editor of American Arab Affairs. And barely more than a year later, she took the top job at the journal, and she's now retiring after 40 years of service. Now, she'll be talking to Ambassador Freeman about her experiences and their work together, and whether and how the politics of the region have changed over her tenure. But I thought, by way of introduction, I could frame her time at the council through just a few of her accomplishments and some of the major developments. Now, Anne's first editor's note was written just after the re-election of Ronald Reagan as the oldest president ever. She wrote of signs of hope in the region and in US politics, quote, "Elected officials are becoming increasingly willing to violate a taboo and speak out in favor of the participation of the Palestinians through the PLO in negotiating their own destiny." Now, as an aside, in that first issue in 1984, she interviewed former Secretary of State of Defense, Harold Brown, and one of her idols, Noam Chomsky. This remains her favorite interview, as she had earned a degree in linguistics before coming to the council. In 1987, the Washington Post excerpted another of Anne's editor's notes and put it square in the middle of their opinion page. In that piece, she also voiced hope quote, "There has been a shift in presuppositions to the point where it is not unthinkable for some progress to occur, at least in setting up a framework for a peace conference and a formula for Palestinian representation." That's 1987. Her final editor's note in 2020 was written just after Biden's election as the oldest president ever. She wrote of the Abraham Accords, US efforts to muddle through, and unfortunately no longer wrote of signs of hope. Quote, "Other Gulf Arab states may also be leaning toward normalization, but the Palestinians have not been given so much as a token. If the Palestinians are cheated, attaining real peace will become impossible." But I'll leave those weighty political matters to our guests. I just want to, end just thinking about some of the other changes that occurred during her tenure. When Anne started at the journal, the editors received all their submissions on paper, and they retyped all the articles, including the corrections. And as part of that, they included codes as long as 24 characters to signal to the printer all the formatting changes, like all caps or bold or left justify. And the journal faced really high fees for making corrections once they got the proofs back from the printer. Now we have the benefit of lightning fast correcting and coding, though the ease of technology has not necessarily been matched by the thoughtfulness of our analyses. Speaking for my generation. In the third decade of the 21st century, Anne is leaving the journal as the third highest rated in its field by Google Scholar. In 1983, of course, Google was just a 1 followed by 100 zeros. In 1983, they're near Anne's home in Virginia. In football, won the Super Bowl. The Orioles were on the way to winning the World Series. You could go to football games inside the district lines, though they always sold out, but you had to travel to Largo to see basketball. The Capitals were irrelevant. And then, as unfortunately now, there was no baseball in DC. At the end of her tenure, the subway exists, but is in danger of budget shortfalls and collapse. The Orioles have made the playoffs just 4 times in 40 years. You have to travel to Largo to see football, but no one wants to. Basketball is basically in walking distance of the office, and the Capitals, for the most part, are the only team that matters. But many things endure. Anne's most cherished institutions, including the National Gallery, the Kennedy Center, the Washington Opera, the Symphony, the Arena Stage, all remain. She continues to play tennis many times a week, as she always has, and she enjoys, most important, the love and admiration of her family and colleagues, and she still has a home with the council. Helena, back to you.
Oh, Adam, that was so lovely. I mean, I love the way you framed 40 years of her career.
Sports futility.
And
Thank
Washington,
you.
DC
That's right.
history, because that's
Yeah.
about the same period of time that I've been in DC as well. So yeah, thank you. Beautiful. Okay, so now, Anne Joyce, you've been beautifully introduced, and Chaz Freeman, less beautifully introduced, but introduced anyway. So we have been joined by Basma El-Hussein. Basma, I had actually introduced you before, because we weren't sure if you were there or not. But let's have you say your few words after the conversation with Chaz and Anne.
You're muted, Basma. You're muted. Basma, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I just want to let you all know I have been with you since the beginning, but I clicked an audience member link so you all couldn't see me and I couldn't talk to you. So I'm sorry. But wonderful to now be on the panel, and I look forward to your conversation.
Great. Well, good to have you with us. So Anne and Chaz, we've had so many amazing experiences and developments in the Middle East in these past 40 years. I made a little list of the main ones that I had identified, which is 2 US wars in Iraq and the Gulf, the whole roller coaster of Israeli-Palestinian peacemaking or its absence, the invasion of Iraq, the invasion of Afghanistan, the Arab Spring, and the Middle East where it is today. So first of all, Anne, would you like to jump in and say which of these kind of developments you think had the most impact on your work?
Well, the council's leader, George Nafee, stepped down in because of the rift between the Palestinians and the states of the Gulf. And it made a tremendous difference. George Nafee deserves so much credit for starting something from nothing. And I think I failed to appreciate him while he was still with us at the council. But at any rate, just to insert that bit of history, that's one that meant a tremendous amount to the council.
So that would have been in 1990 after Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait, and then there was a big to-do amongst the Gulf Coordination Council members with the fact that Yasser Arafat had been Baghdad. So Chaz, you came to the council a little bit later, toward the end of the 90s. What were the main events in the Middle East that affected the council and your work at the council while you were there?
Well, I had never contemplated doing anything in this arena of public education on policy issues. And I was essentially given the river hose treatment by George McGovern and Frank Carlucci and the late Abdullah Dabak. I saw it basically as a volunteer effort. I asked for the difference between my Foreign Service retirement and the active duty pay that I'd had, and I actually ended up contributing to the council a bit financially as we went forward. What I hadn't understood was that the council was living hand to mouth. One of my first questions was, what's the endowment? And of course there was none. And I spent a lot of time trying to rectify that. We had some periods, which Anne will remember well, when we weren't sure whether we could make payroll. But I very quickly became convinced of the importance of the council's work. I credit that mainly to Anne, who had a passion about the Israel-Palestine issue, which I did not have when I first arrived. As I learned more about that and the essential injustice of the situation, I guess I became sufficiently interested in it to jeopardize my political future. But I owe a great deal to Anne and to her editor's notes, which Adam mentioned, which were quite fiery on occasion. And I want to ask Anne a question, may I?
Absolutely.
Anne, how did you get interested in the Middle East, aside from George Nafee and the organization, and where did your passion come from?
Well, I have always revered Noam Chomsky, and I've read his. I have a master's in linguistics and studied his technical work in that field very closely, and also read his political essays. And I think I was persuaded quite a bit by him. I got to interview him for our journal the first year I was there, and when I brought my copy of his book, Aspects of the Theory of Syntax, for him to autograph, he was quite shocked because, the field of Middle East policy and the Palestinians, which I was there to interview him about, didn't exactly dovetail with the linguistics aspect of my background. So at any rate, it's all quite dependent on chance.
So Anne, we've had some mentions of your editor's notes, which I think developed over time as you got kind of more and more confident in your own voice. But your role as an editor is also something that people have noted again and again. And I have to say, as a writer, I have a sort of a dual kind of a relationship with editors. When I have a good editor, there is nothing better for a writer than working with a good editor. And there aren't many good editors out there. So could you talk a little bit about how you framed, how you brought together what the content of each issue would be? Was that a way to affect the public discourse, or a way to highlight previously unheard voices?
Well, it depended, we had a very small staff. We had to put together 4 issues a year. There was a lot of work involved, and it was very hard to plot out exactly what was going to be the mission of each issue. So we had a huge number wonderful unsolicited articles sent our way, and of course junk, but I don't want to go into that. At any rate, it was never, we were never trying to plot out exactly what was going to be in each issue, because current events determined a lot of that. And I think that was a good way to go, because people wanted current analyses of current events. And at any rate, it helps that I'm not exactly a control freak, although maybe people will accuse me of that in another minute or two. At any rate, it's yeah, you walk a fine line trying to be up to the minute and yet wise at the same time. It's really hard. It's something you can't really plan totally effectively, but we were lucky that we had so many people interested in publishing with us. It just shows you that if you create a forum, a platform for views, you are inundated with material. People really want a place to say something, and they don't just want to put it on the internet, even though we didn't have the internet back at the beginning. People want to show that they've gone through some kind of process of selection and curation. And so at any rate, it's still something that people want.
What makes Middle East policy and made it under Anne such an important publication was that it's not peer reviewed, and it provides a forum for the expression of honest opinion on subjects that are very much subject to political correctness and constraints. And I must say, over the course of my career, I've several occasions was in charge of literally many thousands of people. I learned to delegate. I can't remember a more comfortable delegation than that with Anne. I don't think Anne, at least I cannot recall a single instance in which I had to give you guidance. I let you do your thing and you did it brilliantly. And once in a while, you would have a problem where maybe I was a little helpful in sorting things out, but you did an extraordinary job, and I think this event is very much justified. And I hope, Adam, that as you said, the high standards that Anne established will be sustained.
Thank you. I appreciate that compliment coming from you.
So if we take the Israeli-Palestinian issue over the course of these 40 years, it's something that probably nearly all of us on this call have thought about, have talked about, have written about, have worried, have anguished over. And to be honest, the situation today, you know, in June of 2023 is just horrible for people, for Palestinians living in historic Palestine and outside of historic Palestine. And can you recall contributions that you had from Palestinians or from other writers that really helped to shift the discussion in this country? Because I think, and maybe you or Chaz would disagree. By the way, I want to note to my colleague Amel, it looked as though the recording has been paused.
Oh.
And we do want to have this be okay. Gosh, I hope we didn't lose much of that.
No, there is a note saying the webinar is being recorded.
Okay, I think so. It's being recorded on her computer. So I was just worried there. Anyway, so back to the Palestinian issue and the voices that you had. Are there contributions that you can recall that helped to move the needle in the discussion in this country? And maybe as a supplement to that from both of you, I'd love to know if the degree to which you think the needle has been moved in this country in the discussion on the Palestine issue.
I can't really say that that we made a big difference. But I think when people, we had readers who appreciated what we published, and I think that has a resonance factor attached to it. That once you see something in print, you talk about it, it extends the daring of people to talk about something else. And at any rate, it was a very arid atmosphere, or I should say barren atmosphere, when everyone was echoing what our government policy was, and people were not speaking out in favor of change, which we represented. We weren't alone, and we didn't change everything, but we rode along with others who were interested in change, and that's gratifying.
I think it's fair to say that the Holy Land is where optimism goes to die.
Yeah, that's right.
I think, I came into my encounter with the Israel-Palestine issue very naively, like most Americans. I believe the official propaganda for the most part. And I gradually discovered that this is the region where hypocrisy was first invented. I think there have been two major changes over this period. I would like to think that the discussions that we mounted on Capitol Hill and in the journal contributed to these changes. One is that the Israel-Palestine issue is now no longer a taboo subject to the extent that it was. It is more often discussed. It has also become, I should say, a partisan issue. That is a big difference. I'm not sure whether that's good or bad. It's probably the product of Mr. Netanyahu and the other Yahoos interfering in our political system. But there's another difference, and that is that the enlightened in Israel, of whom there were many, are now speaking out or leaving. There's quite an exodus of people who are disgusted with the situation. And the American Jewish communities, there is no single community, of course, there are many, are increasingly open in their disillusionment with Zionism. These are changes that are important and that provide the basis for an eventually more effective policy than the essential fraudulent peace process that we pursued for so long.
Well, yes, it would be nice if there were an alternative we could almost immediately turn to. Your other life commitment, Chaz, well, not one of your other life commitments, knowing Chinese and having done so much work on Chinese issues, Beijing is now offering to mediate in the Israeli-Palestinian issue. First of all, I have no idea why they would want to do that, because it's, but do you
well, I think I can explain why they want to do it, or at least why they say they want to do it, because I'm not convinced they're really prepared to do it or capable of doing it. But they are responding to global opinion. We talk about the global South, but there's actually a global majority that is fed up with this issue and the way it's been mishandled. And you see this in votes in the United Nations, where the United States is joined by Israel and Nauru and maybe one or two other Pacific islands in support of US policy, and everyone else disagrees. So I think the Chinese, I have to say, whether they're sincere or not, I don't know. Sincerity is a rare commodity in governments generally, but they're certainly taking a stance which they believe boosts their popularity globally. And I think that's right. It does.
So, Anne, I don't know if you've had any thoughts on China's Middle East policy recently, but if not, I have a couple of other things I wanted to ask you.
Oh, no, I'm not an expert on China at all. I don't want to override Chaz Freeman on that.
So I think one of the signal things that Middle East Policy Journal did was publishing some important pieces, and maybe this was also some of your editor's notes on at the time of the invasion of Iraq and the build up to the invasion of Iraq. When you look back on that, first of all, can you recall which of those articles seemed to be most prophetic and accurate? And also, you know, just your reflections more generally on that whole episode.
Well, it seems a long time ago, doesn't it?
20 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, it was quite shocking. But the things I remember about changes in the politics of the Gulf and whether the Gulf countries were supporting the Palestinians and so on, that was important to us, and it really it caused our leader George Nafee to retire because he just couldn't face the split in the between the Palestinians and the Arab countries, generally speaking. So at any rate, it seems a long time ago, and I don't want to overdraw cause and effect, but at any rate, he retired sort of abruptly, but it was a time of tremendous change.
So
I think
actually,
maybe one of the most important things that the journal did was to publish the book by John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt, the article on the Israel lobby, had been originally commissioned by the Atlantic, which then withdrew its support for the publication. They had published overseas in the London Review of Books, and we stepped forward, and I'm very proud we did, to publish that. It was an emperor has no clothes moment, and no good deed goes unpunished, of course. So we were duly castigated for that. But I'm very proud of it, and I'm proud of Anne for doing that.
Thank you. Yes, well, we never carried public opinion very much because it seemed so futile. So I guess it paid off in that instance.
So Anne, you've also worked on the boards of a number of other organizations concerned with Palestinian rights, and I was trying to remember which these were.
AMEU, Americans for Middle East Understanding, was the main one, headquartered in New York, and at the Interchurch Center near Columbia University. At any rate, yes, I admire those people quite a bit, but I try not to take on too many other responsibilities at other organizations. No, I'm proud to have worked with you on a couple of things, but really not taking too much responsibility.
So actually, I think now we've had a couple of mentions of George Nafee. Amel, if I could ask you to cue up the video we have from a former colleague of yours, Anne, somebody called Dr. John Sandwick, who is recalling
goodness.
some of the moments that you and he shared with George Nafee back in the early days. So,
thank you for digging that up.
Yeah, well, John Sandwick really wanted us to share this. He runs an Islamic finance consulting business in Riyadh, and he contributed this short video. Amel.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. John Sandwick, and I'm in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia right now, heading back to my home in Geneva, Switzerland tomorrow. I'll be just arriving in Switzerland when you all join together to celebrate the nearly 40 years of Anne Joyce's work for the Middle East Policy Council. I worked with Anne Joyce for 6 years, 1984 to 1989. Those were amazing times with an amazing woman. You see, Anne did not just tolerate good English. She was a perfectionist. She demanded the best English. Her editing skills could have matched anyone at the New York Review of Books or more. When Anne witnessed my clumsy English, she took it on herself to teach me the language all over again. And it was a gift, one that I thank her for every day. Anne and I worked under the cantankerous George Nafee. And believe me, we had some very difficult days. We'd look at each other, roll our eyes. Yet in his own way, George allowed us a lot of space, a lot of latitude in crafting that journal. Anne and I worked for it as a team. We supported each other, and over 6 years we built that journal into something of some substance, something we could be proud of. Yet, in all respects, it was Anne's intellectual power that sat behind those editorial decisions. I'm glad I played a supporting role, but in honesty, the greatness of that journal was Anne's achievement. Thank you, Anne Joyce. I'm thankful for the gifts you gave me. I'm thankful for our long friendship. And most of all, I'm thankful you showed to all of us your courage to do great things over a long time period. Your determination is indomitable. Thank you, Anne Joyce.
Thank you, John Sandwick. We shared an office, by the way. That's unheard of these days. He and I were face to face across 2 desks for years. I can't even remember exactly how many, but we were not well matched, and yet we got along fine, as it turned out. We had to, and we were facing, our employer, George Nafee, and at any rate, it worked out all right. But we had some painful moments, but really we fought a battle together that I appreciate much more now than I did then.
So he had many more things that he wanted to say, but I said he had to keep it to 2 minutes because he said you really effectively taught him to write, and that helped him get his PhD. So there you go. What a fine editor can do. Okay, and I have one other contribution. Amel, do you have some people who want to speak? I haven't actually looked at the list recently. Oh, have we, Amel? Oh dear. So,
hi, yeah, we have a quick question from Rick Sterling.
I don't recall the specific, the question is, do I recall any of the specific fiery comments? There were so many that I can't really.
Yes, that's right. I know. It was the general tenor.
Anne would bring her editorial notes to me for review, and I would not disagree with her, but I'd ask her if she couldn't find a different way of phrasing things sometimes, rather than throwing the bombs that I agreed with her we should be thrown. And I must say, she was accommodating, but very firm in her views. And I appreciated and admired that. Thank you.
So,
well, I must say, I want to drop another name before I forget it, and that's Noam Chomsky. I studied linguistics and had a master's degree when I came to Washington. But then to get to know Noam Chomsky and to be able to write letters to him, dear Noam, best Anne, and so forth, that was so meaningful to me. And it's hard to explain to people outside our field, but Chomsky was like Einstein to us. Just thought I'd throw that in before I forgot, in case he gets word of my comments here.
Oh, I'm sure he will, because he is still a giant in, the public policy field as well as the field of linguistics. So that.
Yes, I know. I can't believe that I actually had so many interactions with him after having gotten to know him through the academic route. It was incredibly meaningful to me.
So I wanted to ask also your views about the Arab Spring. I know, that it's a large and complex set of developments, but it's one that over the past 12 years has really framed the lives of a lot of people in the Middle East, and also the way that Americans think about the Middle East. Do you recall publishing some early pieces about the Arab Spring, and how do you assess where?
But we did. I think we latched onto that rather firmly and published quite a bit on it. But I can't remember specific authors who made a tremendous difference. You know, we were very happy to ride along with this encouraging change, but at any rate, things tend to remain in stasis when you hope they'll change. But at any rate, I don't want to go on and on about that. But certainly it was something we hoped would accomplish more. But as I wanted to throw out this quote, I think from Ian Lustig, problems don't get solved. You can just trade up for better problems. So that's the lesson for today about the subject matter we're dealing with.
It's a little bit bleak. What do you think, Chaz? Do you think that there are glimmers of hope in the region that we haven't identified yet? What can we say about the region of West Asia / the Middle East, and also about US policy there?
Well, it's a very different region now than it was when I arrived in Riyadh in 1989 to take up my duties as ambassador there. American hegemony is no more in the region. There's no country, whether it's Saudi Arabia or the UAE or Qatar or Israel, that now follows the American lead. Everybody feels empowered to follow their own national interests as they see them. And I think that's also true, by the way, of the Palestinians. They are very disillusioned with external support. It's a very dangerous moment in Israeli-Palestinian interactions, I'm sorry to say. But the American writ no longer runs. And you asked earlier, Helena, about the Chinese purported offer to mediate between Israel and Palestine, as they did between Saudi Arabia and Iran. This is a sign of the times that the region is no longer content to be patronized by the United States alone, but is looking for to diversify its support, to free itself from great power dominance, whether it's French, British, American, Soviet, or Chinese. The Chinese will not be invited to take the role of the United States in the past by countries in the region. So there's a trend. Perhaps it began with the Iranian Revolution, the Islamic Revolution, where Iran cast off foreign tutelage and installed the independent Shiite government. But it's now the norm in the region. So it's very, very different. And I think turning to Adam and his stewardship of the Middle East Journal, Middle East Policy Journal, covering this region is now going to be very different. It's not directed by great power rivalry. It's directed by the national interests of the various nation states that have emerged in the region. Much more complex game, and one that I don't think Americans understand and do need to be educated about.
Yeah, we have a comment from Zach Vono. Zach, I don't know if you would like to ask it on air or contribute it on air. Okay, so Amel, if you could have Zach Vono come up as and then turn on his video. Hi.
Hi, Anne and Chaz.
Oh.
Very good to see you both.
I'm so glad to see you. Thank you for calling in.
Of course.
It's been
And
such a
good to see
long
you too,
time.
Adam. I I should have prepared a remark. I don't really have prepared remarks, but I do just want to thank you, Anne, for all of the people you've supported as a boss and as editor-in-chief of Middle East Policy Council. Countless interns have passed through MEPC, myself included, as a bright-eyed, naive college student in 2008, before joining the council as your editorial assistant and then the production designer for a number of journals. So I've seen so many people get their starts under your tutelage and then go on to do amazing, profound things. So I think that side of your work should not be forgotten as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you for saying that. I enjoyed my association with you, and to see you go on to something related to work that you did on the journal, that was very gratifying to me too. What are you doing now exactly?
I am now a creative strategy director in advertising, which is only marginally less mercenary than working in nonprofits.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but at any rate, thank you for reminding me. I knew that already, but I couldn't have said it. And at any rate, I'm glad to see you.
Likewise.
So we also have two other contributions who came in through the Q&A. Could we queue up Richard Schmierer? Amel, bring in Richard Schmierer, and then after that we have Elizabeth Rehani. And while we're waiting for Richard Schmierer, I would like to just contribute something that came in from my friend Graham Fuller, who is a writer and a global affairs analyst, worked with a certain agency in Northern Virginia for a long time. Graham says, I did want to register my warmest wishes and admiration and fondest memories of my many years of dealing with Anne. She helped mentor me as I moved into more public venues of writing, apart from the stiffer prose of the Rand Corporation, and inspired me to push the envelope in writing more and more longer range pieces of speculative geopolitical thinking. She is a great person with a great political feel for the region and a warm personality who has made a major contribution to American thinking about the Middle East. Please give Anne my very best in admiration and fond memories. So.
Thank you so much. And I return those remarks warmly in kind to you.
So that's for Graham Fuller. And now Richard Schmierer, you had a question.
Yes, first of all, I just want to thank you for doing this program today, and certainly thank Anne on behalf of all of us. At the council, I have the great pleasure to have been a successor to Chaz as president of MEPC, and Chaz was very much a mentor to me as I took on that role some years ago. As Anne knows, I've made many contributions to the journal, and every one of them has been significantly improved by Anne's editing. So thank you for that, Anne. In addition to just thanking you and congratulating Anne, I did have a question because, and what you've been talking about with the most recent developments. In a few minutes, I'll be doing an interview with a Shark TV on the role of Russia in the Middle East. And it occurred to me that it would be interesting to get Chaz your thoughts and Anne your thoughts. Does an organization like MEPC, which was founded to promote mutual understanding between the U.S. and the Middle East, do you see our role as being somewhat different today in a world in which the countries of the Middle East are sort of declaring their independence or forging a path separate and different from their former very, very close alliance with the U.S.? How does that affect our mission in terms of what we should be doing with the countries of the Middle East? So Chaz, Anne, I'd be happy to have either of you make any comments on that.
Anne?
I was going to say, Chaz, perhaps you would like to go first. At any rate, it's we fool ourselves when we think we're leading the pack or the people are following our advice. It's really a wide open world out there now, and maybe we were always, well, it's it is what it is. Life is quite different.
I think the environment has fundamentally changed. We are now drowning in state-sponsored propaganda, not just our own, which long ago we succumbed to, but that of governments in the region, not just the Zionist lobby, but now the various Gulf states have set up their own think tanks, or perhaps they are belief tanks. That is, the alternative to thinking is to believe in something and look for evidence of it. And I think the Middle East Policy Council, as an American institution with American roots and an American perspective, now has to take on countering some of the propaganda from the region, as well as enlightening Americans about our own misunderstandings of it. This is a very difficult task. The council has always been, as I said, Richard, before you came on, living hand to mouth, basically. And we do need, I think, I'm no longer associated with the council except in an emeritus capacity. But I think we have to find the authentic American voice that questions everybody, because we are now being essentially manipulated by a combination of state-owned propaganda, social media, and other manipulative systems. So this is a grave challenge, both in terms of financing the council and in terms of its role, and I think it has the capacity to do that. So I'm optimistic for once about something.
That's music to our ears. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good thing to remember, that, you know, we can all do a lot more independent thinking than perhaps we imagine we can. We are bounded sometimes by our own constraints. I think we'll have one more question from Elizabeth Rehani. It's a contribution, I think, more than a question, but it seemed like a very nice and important contribution. And then after Elizabeth has interacted a little with Anne and maybe Chaz, I'll come back to you, Basma, and ask you just to give like a quick summary of what the Middle East Policy Council is doing today, and then we're going to have to wrap up. Sorry, we couldn't have Basma on earlier for technical reasons, but Elizabeth, you're on the floor.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for giving me just a minute, and congratulations. I realize it's probably almost to the day 30 years since I walked in as an intern to the Middle East Policy Council. By that point, I think you had already traveled to Saudi Arabia with Senator McGovern and my dad, who served on the MEPC board for years.
Yes, I'm a great admirer of your father. He was wonderful.
Yeah, so when I saw this invitation to come and celebrate you, I had to jump at it. Going through his things over the past few years, I found an album of your trip to Saudi with Senator McGovern, and remarkable in general, but even for that time, you were the only woman in any of the pictures. And you were also never in the background. You were standing with everybody else. And I just remember thinking and reflecting and like just how proud my dad was to work with this organization and with you specifically. And just thank you for your mentorship of me too that summer. A brief time it was, but it changed the way I thought about a lot of things moving forward. And yeah, so we've been living in DC for 25 years now, and a lot of that had to do with my experience, I think, that summer. So thank you to that, and to Ambassador Freeman too, who also I know my dad held in very high esteem.
Your dad was a wonderful.
Your father, Fuad Rehani, was a great man, in my estimation, enormously warm and thoughtful and competent, and a great supporter of the Middle East Policy Council. And it wouldn't have survived without him. So thank your family. I do.
Yes, I'll second that. And we have a picture on our wall in the office. You're welcome to visit anytime, of course.
Oh, great.
That reminds me of him often.
Anyway, congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this has been just a wonderful event, encompassing voices from the past, from the present, and from the future. I want to thank Elizabeth for coming and everybody else who asked their questions on air here. I want to add my own really strong appreciation for Anne, because I know she is a fiercely independent woman, and as she says, a perfectionist, but also very warm-hearted, and she has wonderful stories to tell. She's done a great job at the council and in all her other commitments, including with Just World Educational. When I founded Just World Educational 7 years ago, Anne was crucial in helping us to formulate what the organization should do, and she has been ever since. So, you know, please stay on the board. And I'm going to hand over quickly to Basma El-Hussein, who is the current executive director of the Middle East Policy Council, so that she can say a few quick words about where the Policy Council is going now, and perhaps her appreciation also of Anne's work there. And then we'll come back here and wrap up.
Thank you, Helena.
You're muted.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you everyone for this incredible afternoon. It's been so enriching to hear about Anne's incredible legacy and to hear Ambassador Freeman speak. I have to thank both of you for your incredible principled leadership and courage that is to do everything, to say everything, to create the spaces that you did. It's hard to do it now as a Palestinian American who works in democratic politics, in and out of democratic politics, and the times that you stood up and did what you did, it's so inspiring. And I'm so honored that on some level, Adam and I and the rest of the team are chosen to try and carry the torch. So thank you for your continued leadership and your continued presence. And with that, the things that we are trying to do, Adam is doing a really incredible job of maintaining the integrity and high standards that Anne set for the journal, at the same time recognizing that people consume information differently than they used to. So creating more web-friendly products that can reach a wider and younger audience. We don't want to have high quality content only exclusively available to the elite. They need to be able to reach the masses, in part to counter that propaganda that Ambassador Freeman was talking about. We have really expanded our presence on the Hill. I have a very strong background in congressional affairs and worked on the Hill as well. As we know, much of the root of the problem with the U.S. position towards Palestine and Israel is largely focused and rooted in the Hill. So those conversations are extremely important. And then, of course, we have our Teach Mideast program, which we have an incredible staffer who's really expanded this and made it more of a virtual exchange program. So rather than it only being U.S. students learning about the Middle East, it's connecting classrooms in the Middle East with classrooms in the West. So that, people who maybe don't have passports have the opportunity to still, get out of their shell, establish relationships, learn different perspectives. And so we have a very bright future ahead of us. We need your support. We need your time. We need your money. We need your guidance and advice. So please stay engaged with the council, and I would love to see many of you in the office to see some of the wonderful pictures that Anne was discussing, and hopefully we can have a lunch and or cocktail hour for her soon. And so those of you who are in DC, please do keep in touch with us. We would love to meet you in person. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Basma. I'm so sorry about the technical problems at the beginning, but glad that we could have you with us, and seeing you and Adam and all the other young people that you have, that you're carrying on the legacy there at the Middle East Policy Council. And I think that's really important. And you have a very strong basis from which to grow. I want to put a pitch in here for Just World Educational. We do different things. We don't only do the Middle East, we do global affairs, we do war and peace issues. And because we're very small, I think that makes us agile, but we have a strong continuing commitment to Palestinian rights that I think it's really wonderful to have Anne and other board members who support that so strongly. So on that note, Anne, Joyce, I just want to say this feels like a very cheesy, this is your life type TV program, but thank you for everything you've done, everything you continue to do. Thanks for your feistiness, your commitment, your skills, your commitment to education in all the meanings of the word, and look forward to working with you for many years going into the future. And just before we go, I want to say thank you to our dear friend, Ambassador Chaz Freeman, for joining us today. I think that, Chaz, your contribution gave like some real heft to the conversation as we went forward. And we know that the three of us and my colleagues, our colleagues on the Just World Educational Board, will go ahead and do several good things in the coming months and years. So we'll wrap up now. I do want to say Just World Educational needs your donations, just as Middle East Policy Council does. I want to thank everybody who contributed questions, that especially the ones that we were not able to answer, but it was really lovely to have so many of you on the screen here with us today. And go forth and educate.
Thank you. And I second all of your comments regarding the other people present and maybe listening in.
Okay.
It's
Goodbye.
been great to be with you. Bye-bye.